The moment the gavel came down inside courtroom 3 of the Federal High Court in Abuja, there was a brief silence. Not the empty kind, but the heavy kind, the type that carries months of tension, whispers, meetings, court papers, and political uncertainty. Justice Peter Lifu had spoken, and with that single judgment, the long-running leadership crisis in Nigeria's Labour Party took a decisive turn. Julius Abure was out. Senator Nenadi Usman was in. The court formally recognized the Senator Nenadi Usman-led Caretaker Committee as the legitimate leadership of the Labour Party, bringing an official end to Julius Abure's claim as national chairman. For many within the party, it felt less like a surprise and more like the final chapter of a story everyone already knew the ending to, but needed the law to confirm. Now, at this point, let's rewind a little. It was a typical Abuja morning. The road leading to the Federal High Court complex buzzed with activity. Black SUVs pulling in, lawyers in dark suits adjusting their files, journalists holding phones and recorders, party members standing in small clusters, speaking in hushed tones. Security presence was calm but firm. Police officers manned the entrances, guiding people through security checks. There was no chaos, no shouting, just a quiet awareness that something important was about to happen. Inside the courtroom, supporters from both camps sat on opposite sides. Some stared straight ahead, others avoided eye contact. A few whispered prayers. This case had dragged on long enough to create emotional fatigue across the Labour Party family.
When Justice Peter Lifu began reading the judgment, his tone was steady, measured, and firm. He did not raise his voice. He did not dramatize the moment. He simply laid out the law. And the law, this time, was very clear. The court held that Julius Abure's tenure as national chairman of the Labour Party had expired. Materials placed before the court, Justice Lifu said, showed this beyond doubt. The judge anchored his decision squarely on the April 4, 2025 ruling of the Supreme Court, Nigeria's highest court, which had already nullified Abure's claim to the office. And then came the consequential order that sealed it all. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, was directed to immediately recognize the Nenadi Usman-led Caretaker Committee as the only lawful authority to act for and represent the Labour Party pending the conduct of a national convention. At that point, you could almost feel the air change. On the side where Senator Nenadi Usman's supporters sat, there was visible relief. Not loud celebration, not clapping, just deep breaths, quiet nods, and a few misty eyes. For them, this judgment was not just about power. It was about legitimacy, structure, and survival of the party. One party member standing outside the courtroom afterward whispered to a colleague, "At least now we can move forward." On the other side, the Abure camp looked stunned. Some shook their heads slowly. Others stood up quietly and walked out without saying a word. This was not just a legal loss. It was the end of a long resistance against a tide that had been building since last year.
Politics often looks like strategy and ambition from the outside, but inside it is people. People who have invested years, relationships, reputations, and emotions. Losing a leadership battle like this is not easy for anyone, no matter how tough they appear. The leadership tussle within the Labour Party did not start today or even this year. It grew slowly, quietly, then suddenly became loud. In September 2024, Senator Nenadi Usman was appointed caretaker chairperson of the Labour Party, alongside 28 other members of a caretaker committee. That decision itself came amid internal disagreements over party leadership and the expiration of tenures. Julius Abure, however, continued to present himself as national chairman, relying on an earlier judgment of the Court of Appeal that had recognized him. But here's where the story gets more interesting. On April 4, 2025, the Supreme Court stepped in and changed everything. In a unanimous decision delivered by a 5-member panel led by Justice Inyang Okoro, the Apex Court set aside the Court of Appeal's ruling. The Supreme Court held that the Court of Appeal lacked the jurisdiction to determine issues bordering on the leadership of a political party. In simple terms, the highest court in the land said that recognition of Abure by the Court of Appeal should never have happened. That ruling effectively ended the leadership debate, at least on paper. But in reality, disagreements continued, leading Senator Nenadi Usman to approach the Federal High Court to challenge Abure's continued stay in office. Abure and the Nigerian Labour Congress (NLC) were listed as defendants in the suit. One of Abure's key arguments was that the matter was an internal party affair, something courts should not interfere with. It's an argument often used in political disputes, and sometimes it works. This time, it didn't. Justice Lifu dismissed that argument outright. He ruled that the constitution of a caretaker committee was not a random decision or political maneuver, but a necessity arising directly from the binding orders of the Supreme Court. The judge made it clear that once the Supreme Court had spoken, there was no room for continued personal interpretation or defiance. The Apex Court's decision, he said, had already resolved the leadership tussle and left no space for Julius Abure to continue claiming the position of national chairman. That statement alone carried weight. Perhaps one of the most important parts of the judgment was the directive to INEC. By ordering INEC to recognize the Nenadi Usman-led Caretaker Committee, the court effectively restored administrative clarity to the party. INEC recognition is not symbolic. It determines who can submit party lists, sign official documents, and represent the party in electoral matters. Earlier, on January 9, the Labour Party's National Working Committee, NWC, had already taken a step in this direction. The NWC announced its recognition of Senator Nenadi Usman as national chairman, saying the decision was in full compliance with the Supreme Court judgment. In a statement, the party said the move reaffirmed the April 4, 2025 ruling of the Supreme Court, which declared that Julius Abure's tenure had elapsed. The NWC reaffirmed that all congresses and the National Convention of the party shall hold accordingly in strict compliance with the provisions of the party constitution, the statement read. Members at all levels are therefore encouraged to actively participate in the Congress processes. That message now carries more authority following the Federal High Court's judgment. However, across party offices in Abuja, Lagos, and other states, reactions poured in quietly. Some party members expressed hope that the decision would finally allow the Labour Party to focus on rebuilding and organizing rather than fighting itself. Others called for restraint and reconciliation. On social media, supporters debated the judgment with passion. Some praised the courts for upholding the rule of law. Others worried about lingering bitterness and the risk of further fragmentation. In a small Labour Party office in Abuja, a group of young members watched the news on a mobile phone. One of them said softly, "All we want is a party that can stand united again." That sentiment echoed across many states. Beyond the Labour Party, this judgment carries a broader lesson for Nigeria's political space. First, it reinforces the authority of the Supreme Court as final. No matter how influential a political actor is, once the Apex Court speaks, the matter is settled. Second, it highlights the dangers of prolonged internal crises. Leadership tussles weaken parties, confuse supporters, and distract from policy, ideology, and governance. Third, it shows the importance of constitutional processes within political parties. Tenure limits, conventions, and congresses are not just formalities, they are safeguards against instability. For a party like the Labour Party, which gained massive national attention in recent election cycles, unity and clarity are not optional, they are essential. It is worth noting that despite the high stakes, security agencies handled the situation calmly. There were no reports of violence, clashes, or arrests. Supporters dispersed peacefully after the judgment. That maturity is important. Political disagreements do not have to spill into the streets. Courts exist precisely to prevent that. As the sun set over Abuja that evening, the court complex gradually emptied. Lawyers drove off. Journalists filed their reports. Party members returned to their camps, some relieved, some disappointed, all aware that a chapter had closed. But this is not the end of the Labour Party story. If anything, it is a moment of decision. Will the party use this clarity to rebuild trust, organize transparent congresses, and prepare for the future? Or will old wounds reopen under new names? The answer depends on leadership, responsibility, and willingness to cooperate. As we continue, please like this video and subscribe. But more importantly, stay informed, stay calm, and stay engaged. Political parties are public institutions. Their stability affects democracy itself. And at times like this, awareness, caution, and cooperation are not just recommendations, they are necessities. For now, the court has spoken.
the law has drawn a line. What happens next is up to the people entrusted with leadership.